And most people have a big burden of suffering from their families, from financial worry, from the craziness of the society around, from the racism, from the, conflict, all those kind of things. And yet, the Buddhist texts begin with this beautiful phrase, "O nobly born, O you who are the sons and daughters of the great sages and awakened ones of the past. Remember your true nature, remember your heritage, that you carry this wisdom and love, and you can embody it, you can find it, you can remember it." And this empowerment to remember and live from this place, which includes yourself, cherishing yourself, really changes our life.
Peace and riches blessings. I am Michael B. Beckwith, the host of Take Back Your Mind. Peace and blessings, everyone, and welcome back to Take Back Your Mind. I am Michael B. Beckwith, the founder and spiritual director of the Agape International Spiritual Center, and your host right here on Take Back Your Mind, where we're always having some level of conversation about taking back our mind. And we have one, and oftentimes it's been hijacked by worldly fear, doubt, anxiety, futurizing. We want to take it back. We want to have a level of sovereignty over the mind through spiritual practices so that it's not governed by nefarious hypnotism, but it's actually governed by love, compassion. It's actually governed by our intrinsic nature and being. So today, I have a magnificent spiritual teacher that is absolutely adept, exactly what I'm telling you about. And it's Brother Jack Kornfield. Let me tell you just a little bit about him. You see him right there on the screen. He is trained as a Buddhist monk in Thailand, India, and Burma. PhD in clinical psychology. Is the founding teacher of the Insight Meditation Society in Massachusetts and Spirit Rock Center in California. Jack is one of the key teachers to introduce mindfulness practice to the West and is taught internationally since 1974. That's 50 years.
Yes, it is.
He's a teacher, a husband, a grandfather, entrepreneur, activist, and has authored 16 books, have sold over 2 million copies. Brother Jack, welcome to Take Back Your Mind.
Thank you, Michael. So glad to see you. What a pleasure.
Absolutely. I was just, we were just talking offline that the last time we saw each other in person, we were doing an event together in the Bay Area. And it was you, me, Alice Walker, and there's another friend of mine. I see her face. I can't block her name right now. It was a wonderful time that we had together. It's good to be with you again.
Yes.
So listen, 50 years. First of all, give those people who may not know that much about you at this time, how you even came into this way of living as a Buddhist monk, as a teacher. I mean, what was your pull? What happened?
Well, I was in college back in the 60s, seems like more than half a century, 60 years ago. And I was thinking I'd go to medical school. I'd go to, organic chemistry class and things. And then this wonderful old Chinese professor, visiting professor, Dr. Wing-Sit Chan came, and he started to talk about Chinese wisdom teachings about Confucius and Lao Tzu. And then he talked about the Buddha. And he said, the Buddha taught that there's suffering in life. I'm nodding. And that there's a path to the end of it, to a joyful heart. And I was sitting there, and I'd come from a really violent and painful family. My father was a wife batterer and a raging person. He did a lot of creative, good things, but he was really terrible to live with and kind of mentally disturbed. And I said, I need this more than chemistry. I need this more than medicine. I need the medicine for the heart. How do I find this? And when I graduated from college, it was still during the Vietnam War. I was out protesting and whatever. And they said, okay, go to the war. I said, no, I want to go to a Buddhist monastery. I need to learn this stuff. And it's a lot. I'd rather go to Asia and, respect people and listen to the old wise Zen masters and go shoot at them. So there I was.
That's beautiful. So the pain pushed you into your present, pushed you
Yes,
into
it
the present
did.
moment.
Yes,
Yeah.
it did. And it
So
almost always does. I mean, once in a while, somebody has some glorious spiritual vision.
yeah,
Hallelujah, may they have more of them.
yeah,
But 90% of the time, it's because we get caught in suffering in this human life.
yeah,
And then we say, how do I transform this? And how do I keep my heart steady? How do I
yeah,
live from a wise place in the middle of all this, some of which is wreckage in our lives? How do I keep my nobility? You said my sovereignty. Yes.
absolutely. I often say that pain pushes us until a vision pulls us, or insight. And as you said, most of the time it's pain. But then when you have a spiritual practice, there are insights that occur because you're more in alignment with participating in your own unfoldment. So you've
You
been
get real. That's the thing.
you get real and
It's
authentic.
not some damn philosophy. Okay, wow, this is really tough. What do I do? My
Right.
kids, my family, my community, crazy things. I need to get real with this. How do I do it?
Absolutely. Now, 50 years. I mean, first of all, let me just say that when I was in college, I was on the path to go to med school too. I was a psychobiology major. I was at USC.
Dr. Michael, I love it. Okay. You
And
became a different kind of doctor.
and so now I'm a doctor of a different kind. But
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting that was you thought that was your path for a while as well. And
Yes.
then at that time I had a series of inner experiences that allowed me to think that I was crazy, that eventually led to some spiritual insights and revelations, but way before transpersonal psychology and way before all of that. So, it was a different terrain then than it is
Yes.
now. So you've been involved over 50 years in mindfulness teachings and spiritual practices. What would you say is the major difference now as opposed to 40, 50 years ago? What has changed in the climate of our spiritual and atmosphere?
Um, so a couple of things. One is when you talk about pain or desperation, I think in the 12-step world, they talk about the gift of desperation at some point.
Yeah.
We are at a turning point culturally and globally. And I look at my grandchildren and I look at, where we are with climate change and increasing warfare and divisiveness. And it's really clear that no amount of technology, not the new AI and computers and internet and micro, you know, space technology and all kinds of new gene technology are not going to stop warfare. They're not going to stop continuing racism. They're not going to stop, conflict, because those are all born in the human heart. And so we're at an inflection point as human beings on this planet. We're being pushed to evolve in some way, both individually and collectively, in a way that I have not. It's like it's built up for this last half a century, and
Yeah.
now it's come on, wake up. You really have to see the oceans are rising. And
Yes.
the thing is, so a friend of mine, a journalist, went to visit Gary Snyder, who is in his 90s, was a Pulitzer Prize winning poet and journalist who got a Pulitzer Prizes in environmentalist for more than 50 years. 60 years ago, he wrote Earth Household and things. Said, Gary, the oceans are rising, the species are dying off, the deserts are getting hotter. What advice do you have to us now after 60 years? And he looked back and he said, don't feel guilty. If you're going to save it, don't save it out of guilt. Don't save it out of fear. Don't save it out of anger. The only force that's strong enough to save it is love.
Mm-hmm.
It's like mothers picking cars off their children. When it really comes down to it, save it because you love it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been really the transformation in the spiritual world. People talk about enlightenment. May they find enlightenment, whatever that means to them. But I want to know, can they find love? And can we share?
Absolutely. You covered a couple of things, but primarily love and compassion, loving kindness. We have to become mature enough to allow our intrinsic nature to be activated. We have to really, really want that, because as you've indicated, that the technology that we're living in has kind of outstripped, in many cases, outstripped our consciousness. The technology
Yes.
has gone further than the evolution of the awareness of love and the awareness of generosity, forgiveness, compassion. And people continue to keep developing technological, using their genius to develop technology and going into outer space. But individuals have forgotten to the inner technology, or haven't even come across the inner technology to go into the inner space,
Yeah.
where love and compassion and that sense of unity one with the other is actually real, actually exists. I was thinking sometimes, I'm a Trekkie. I like Star Trek. I've liked it from the beginning, but I still look at it sometimes and I'll think they're still projecting human consciousness into the future, where they're fighting with Klingons and they're fighting with all these other beings, so that it's still like the extension of this sense of separation
Yes.
extended way into the future. There's no I guess you have to have some kind of drama, I guess, in order to create movies and episodes and things like that. But still, there's no real visual picture of actually living as one.
Yes.
Yeah,
I was invited to go to the first White House Buddhist leadership gathering. As you might imagine, it was back under President Obama, not the last administration before. But anyway,
absolutely. Yeah.
and I was one of the people to kind of sum up what had happened. There were 120 leaders of different Buddhist temples and churches and communities doing all kinds of great stuff. Um, and I talked about how there's a universal wisdom, whether it's the First Nation Iroquois, influencing our own constitution, or whether it's the Incan and Mayan elders, or whether it's the sages in China, Lao Tzu, and or Plato. I said there are all these ideals for a wise society where people treat each other respectfully and honor the environment and so forth. I said, but the point is not just the ideals. We have those.
Mm-hmm.
The beautiful thing is that there are practices for the heart that teach us how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That there's trainings in compassion. There's trainings in loving kindness. I'm doing a year of inner loving kindness practice for myself and everyone I meet. And it's a beautiful practice, and it changes my consciousness. I just see people differently. Mostly, I see them as kids. They think they're adults, but they're really, and I see them as earnest and confused and all the way little kindergartner. But what I said at the White House, we can transform our hearts. There are ways to quiet the mind through meditation and contemplation and inner skills that give us courage and compassion and self-knowledge and ways to care for others. And these are the trainings that humankind really needs. These are the treasures we've inherited from our ancestors. And now it's time to actually spread them and live them.
Yeah, absolutely. I was sharing with the congregation recently, we have our to-do list that we put on our calendars every single day. And I challenged them to put deliberate kindness on your to-do list and put a time on it. At 2:00, deliberate kindness. And whoever you're with, whatever's going on, whether you like the person or don't like the person, whether you're in a meeting, find a way to act upon deliberate kindness. Put it on your to-do list every day until that becomes like an inner habit. That kindness and compassion just become as important on your to-do list as getting something accomplished in the quote unquote real world. So that becomes extremely important, as you're talking about, for the activation of that gift in our own awareness, because we forget about that. I mean, I was thinking,
it's not in our education. We learn reading, writing, arithmetic, but
right.
We don't learn that inner art. And one of the things that's really important that you're saying, Michael, which I found in teaching over all these years, is that in order to have, to trust the heart and to
Hmm.
live more from a place of love and care for yourself and others around, it has to include yourself. There has to
Yeah,
be compassion. It's not just about everybody else. The circle of compassion doesn't even work if you are not included in the middle of it,
absolutely.
in some place. And so the whole sense of mindful, loving awareness has to include loving kindness for yourself, self compassion. And most people have a big burden of suffering from their families, from financial worry, from the craziness of the society around, from the racism, from the, you know, conflict, all those kind of things. And yet, the Buddhist texts begin with this beautiful phrase, O nobly born, O you who are the sons and daughters of the great sages and awakened ones of the past. Remember your true nature, remember your heritage, that you carry this wisdom and love, and you can embody it, you can find it, you can remember it. And this empowerment to remember and live from this place, which includes yourself, cherishing yourself, really changes our life.
Absolutely. If one does not self-forgive or have self-compassion or self-love, I think they create a kind of inner obstacle that gets projected onto the screen of life, and they end up bumping into those obstacles that they think are out there, but they're actually being projected from our own inner mindscape of a lack of self-love or carrying a deep sense of guilt or resentment towards ourselves. So what you're saying is true, and I would say spiritually lawful.
Part of that is as you quiet the mind and tend the heart, you can feel all the self-criticism and judgment and ideas and shame and guilt and the things that are the most kind of that bring you down the most. And then if you really listen and understand, you also understand that those are common to human beings. We've
Yes,
all effed up. We've all made mistakes. We've all
yes,
flunked the course. Nobody gave us the manual of how to live with all, 1, 2, 3 in some simple way. We have to learn it. So first there's a kindness to say, all right, um, I'm in a learning school. I'm not supposed to be perfect. The idea isn't to perfect yourself. It's to perfect your love.
yeah,
And you start
perfect
to
your love.
see all these things and you see your common humanity. We are in this together. And there was, there's a story of the Dalai Lama one morning. This famous physician from CNN, Sanjay Gupta, asked
Mm,
if he could go meditate with the Dalai Lama, and got all this permission and flew to India. And Dalai Lama gets up at like 3:30 in the morning and does his meditations. And Sanjay got this little mat set out next to the Dalai Lama, and they're sitting there quietly in the dark. And after about 30 minutes, the Dalai Lama turns to him and says, Sanjay, how are you doing? And Sanjay says, this is hard. And the Dalai Lama smiles and said, me too. And I heard that. And what I understood, first of all, your heart goes, oh, if it's hard for the Dalai Lama, it's hard for all of us. And that's not the point. Can you hold that with compassion? And this is just our human life that we have to love with all the messiness of it. But the other thing I understood is, sure, the Dalai Lama knows how to meditate, no question. He can find his breath and body and love. But he also is carrying the tragedy of Tibetan people who were overrun by the Chinese Communist Army. He's been called in to help mediate in the Middle East and places in Africa and suffering. Can you help us? People come to him with suffering and difficulty all the time. So when he sits to meditate, it's not the Dalai Lama. It's the Dalai Lama with a heart that cares for all beings. And he wakes up in the morning. His prayer is, may I be a lamp, a lightness of love for all I touch. May I be
absolutely.
medicine for those who are sick. May I be a resting place for the weary. And may I do this for as long as I'm alive, as long as Earth exists. So when he said it's hard for me, he didn't mean it was hard to meditate, because meditation isn't about like, okay, now I'm peaceful and happy. It's actually realizing that your heart is big enough to hold all of this with kindness, that you can
Absolutely.
do this.
Absolutely. And we can do this. You reminded me of a I remember one time I was at a retreat and meditating, and there was a moment where all of a sudden I escaped the body, and these beings told me that I was called to be more compassionate, and it's kind of startled me because
Not just your wife. Oh, I get that too. Anyway, keep going.
and I
They
it's
are
kind
so
of
our partners are channeling the celestial wisdom.
no,
Anyway, go ahead.
it was not a partner. It was, and I said, I'm gonna be more compassionate. And I said, wow, I thought I was doing pretty good on that. And then these like 8 little boxes showed up with scenarios in my life that I'd lived through. And as I got to the 8th scenario, I said, oh my God. And they showed me how hypercritical I was to myself,
Yes.
not just to other people, how not compassionate I was to Michael. And it just hit me and said, oh my God. And that if I, as you just said, if I had more tenderness with Michael and his unfolding, then there would be more compassion expressing through my heart, because I can only be as compassionate to someone else as I am to myself. So everything you're saying, I had a direct encounter with that many years ago, and it totally changed something within me, because I was always kind of, very critical of myself. I could have done better with this. I could have done better with that. Whatever the mind chatter was going on at the time. So everything you're saying, I think, is very, very potent and very real. Now, you've been an activist in your life as well, and you know, what would you say to activists that are dealing with, how do they stay in the vibration of solution rather than the vibration of the problem or whatever the issue is that one is standing up for? Because oftentimes activists get burnt out,
Yes.
they lose their vision, they end up more angry about whatever it is they're fighting for or against. What would you say to that dynamic?
Right. And that's that wise advice from Gary Snyder. If you want to save it, don't save it out of guilt or fear or anger. Save it because you love it. So a few things to say. First, I just have to offer a heartfelt bow to activists, because I have been an activist in all kinds. I've been out on the streets, and I did peace work in Palestine and Israel, and in the monasteries of Burma when the Rohingya were being thrown out in different places. And I lived in monasteries, in forest monasteries, starting 50, 60 years ago, where the monks would tie their robes around the oldest trees in the forest and ordain them as elders, so that the loggers wouldn't cut down the forest. They'd be afraid to touch that part. So it's part of the DNA of living in a wise way in the world, that it's not me, it's we, it's us.
Right.
So I've been going with my beloved Trudy Goodman, who started Inside LA, you know Trudy as well, my colleague and teacher, to a place called Oslo Freedom Forum in Norway, where the Nobel Peace Prize is given.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of it being one person who gets the Nobel Prize, wonderful, they bring together 40 people who are all eligible for the Nobel Prize to learn from each other and support. And first of all, they need each other, because half of them have been thrown in prison or tortured, or the government is chasing them, or all these kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember talking to one really successful rainforest activist who had managed to organize hundreds of thousands of students in South America to help stop the burning of the rainforest. But every time she heard that the rainforests were being set afire again, her menstrual period would start the next day, which meant that she was carrying the fires in her body. So they said, can you help us? Because we know how to do the outer fires, but we don't know how to. And I realize I'm going to meander a little bit.
That's okay.
Yeah. I also had a woman come to me who had worked for the United Nations, a psychologist, and her specialty was working with people who'd been tortured, had come to this country after torture. And she was really good at helping them. But whenever she'd sit to meditate, all the terrible scenes of torture would come back, and she'd be rerunning, because she kept them inside like activists do. So I taught her some things, as I have in Oslo. I taught people, first of all, to take some time and pause. Mahatma Gandhi, when he was in the process of dismantling the British Empire, some little small thing that he did, he would, he would take 1 day a week in silence, quiet the mind, open the heart, tend the heart. And it didn't matter. People would come and say, Gandhiji, there's hundreds of thousands of people rioting in the streets. People are being killed. You must come. And he'd say, sorry, Tuesday's my quiet day. I don't go out on Tuesday. That's the day I have to quiet my mind and listen in the heart for what I can reach and touch and do from the most loving place. So first I taught her to take time off and make sure she had space and walk in the woods and said, what are things that nourish you? Secondly, I taught her a meditation of sweeping down through the body and feeling in her body, because it's held here, all the places that carry the tension and image and emotions, and let it drain down and picture how Mother Earth recycles everything, recycles water and the air and the poop from every animal and so forth, and turns it into nourishment for new plants. So we did a practice of clearing her body. Then we did a practice of self-compassion. Not only do you have it for those people, but you're one of them. And if you can't extend it for yourself, they won't feel it. So picture your people coming in and feel yourself and make a field of self-compassion. I taught her a loving kindness meditation. Then I said, all right, what's the shape of your office? And she described, I said, okay, behind you, I want you to put a big shelf. And on that shelf, I want you to put a statue of the Buddha and Kuan Yin, the goddess of universal compassion, and Mother Mary and Jesus and Kali. You're definitely going to need Kali in that power. And, Krishna, the god of love. And I want you to put the Haitian gods, because you see these people coming from Haiti who've been tortured. And I want you to put a page about the mercy of Allah from the Quran. Any god you ever heard of, put it on that shelf for a couple of reasons. I want, when people come in and see you, to realize that you've got backup. That it's not just you, but that in fact,
that's great.
You're not the first person to do this, that there's centuries or thousands of years of beings like Gandhi or whoever it is, Martin Luther King and, Lehman Gabowi in Africa, who stood up, and you're in the stream of them. They're supporting you. So people don't say, oh, you're going to fix me, but, oh, wow, there's something way bigger to hold all this suffering. And then when you start today, make a bow, light a candle, put an apple or something on there, make an offering, and say, please help me hold all this. So that when you hear or struggle, you go out on the streets as an activist, you're carried by the spirit of these other ancestors and beings. And then I said, at the end of each thing you do, go wash your hands and your face, not just sweep through your body, but release all that's happened for you back into the waters of life in some very deep way, so that you can do that. And at the end of the day, turn toward the altar, make a bow, and say, I place all these people that I love, all the people that I'm trying to help, I place them all in the lap of Mother Mary and the Buddha and Kuan Yin and Kali and so forth. You carry them so that I can go home and tend my own life. Because ritual is this ancient language that allows us to see not the individual, but in an archetypal way. That we're part of an ancestral stream, and we've been called to be an activist. It's like the earth says, you're here, you stand up for the trees, you stand up for those people who are being targeted. You're the one who gives a voice to those who are voiceless, but not out of anger or fear, really out of the great power that says, we're bigger than this.
That's beautiful. So all of this includes individuals who are standing right in the midst of social change, and individuals who are suffering perhaps from compassion fatigue.
Yes.
Everything you've described assists with that dynamic.
Yes. And you can't take it on yourself. You know, when you think in a kind of naive way, especially because the guilt and the grief and the fear, what's going to happen with climate change and, you know, racism and all these things, it's not ending. Um, you take it on as if you're the person to fix the world. And that's really a lot of hubris and ego to think you're supposed to fix the world.
Mm-hmm.
What you're asked to do, you've been given a life and a voice, and more than anything, you've been given a human heart, is to reach out and mend the part that you can.
Yes.
And not take it on as I'm going to do this, but I'm part of a waves of millions of people who care.
Yes.
And I'm with these. This is community in the deepest sense. It's the true community. And it's the very thing that this earth needs. The individualism is our toxic poison, and true community and interbeing. This is one of the great teachings in Buddhism. Not only is the Buddha revered, but the community is revered.
The Sangha, absolutely.
The Sangha, his attendant Ananda went and said, it seems to me that half of the holy life, he said to the Buddha, is having good friends and doing beautiful things with those who have a noble or good heart. And the Buddha said, not so. He said, in fact, the whole of the holy life is having noble friends, good-hearted friends, and helping one another in this way, in this world.
Powerful. Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, because on one hand, you're speaking about we have all this backup on an archetypical level of all the beings who have come before us. At the same time, we have millions of people that are living all over the globe who are working to activate their loving kindness, their compassion, speaking out from in when necessary. So we have both going for us. We have the backup from the infinite all the way through beings who have been here hundreds of years before us, as well as the community of lovers of God, lovers of humanity, lovers of life that are with us now, our community. I often say that there's really only one community, but it's in different locations on the planet. But it's one community seeking to, I like to say, not change the world or save the world, but to serve the emerging paradigm. You know, because the world as we see it, you know, is the condensation of thoughts, beliefs, perceptions that has condensed itself into worldviews. But I do believe that there's an emerging paradigm that's trying to happen. And I think you've seen this after over 50 years, that some of the things we're talking about now, 50 years ago was woo-woo. You know what I mean? It was like those weird people sitting there closing their eyes and doing nothing. You know, now, 50 years later, those people, there's a great understanding with epigenetics and quantum reality and biofeedback and all the things that have emerged, that there's actually something happening when someone turns within and begins to work upon themselves. So we've lived long enough to have this conversation actually be validated by quote unquote science and medicine. We're seeing an emerging paradigm happening that didn't quite exist 56 years ago.
Certainly not widespread in our culture at all. And another gift from what you're saying is that those of us who care in this way and understand can connect with others and help us evolve or awaken together. And I'll give you a story. Some years ago, I was at a retreat working together with Luis Rodriguez, who ran for governor in California a year or two ago. You might know him, a great Latin poet and activist, works in the prisons and all kinds of things, and Michael Meade and a few other wonderful activists. And we were doing retreats for young men coming out of street gangs who were trying to get out of the life, shooting and whatever. And so we had this event, and there we are. And these guys are sitting there and their hoods are up and their hats are up backward. They're leaning back and saying, listen, you're going to read me a poem, Luis. You're going to give me a myth, Michael, or Jack, a meditation. You know, I'm out on the street. People got 9mm. You got to give me something better than that. So we paused and said, you know, we can't even begin to talk with one another because there are too many people here in the room who haven't been honored. And they leaned forward, and we took a candle and lit it and put it, just a candle on a table, and said, would you go out in the parking lot and pick up a stone for every young person you know who's been shot or killed, and bring those stones in and put them by the candle. And these kids, they were, late teens, whatever, came back, some of them with their hands full of stones. This is for Tito, and this is for RJ, and this is for Homegirl, and pretty soon there was a pile of stones around this candle. And everybody sat back down, and the hoods came off, and people leaned forward and like, okay, we're going to get real here. We're going to really talk about the grief that we carry and the loss. And then Michael began to tell a story about warriors, because they are street warriors who'd gone into battle and then came back. There was an African story, a Tibetan story about how they came back and reclaimed their hearts. And so we need each other. We also need elders in some way to say, here's a way you can carry this. Here's a way you can tend your own heart and still stay strong in this world.
It's powerful. Coming back to one's self. Just curiosity, what was your latest book you wrote? I know you written many of them.
Well, one of my latest books was called There's No Time Like the Present.
And what's the primary teaching in that?
Well, there are several. One of them, I'm going to quote Albert Einstein, which is not an artifact of the internet. I looked it up, and Scientific American said, yeah, this is it. He said, if you can drive safely while kissing a girl, you're simply not giving the kiss the attention it deserves. So one of the points is that
I like that. Let's stop there for a second. That was really good.
Yeah, well, thank you, Albert. But one of the points of the book is that we live in a society that's always pulling us away from what we know and care about, what really matters, whether it's that first kiss or the things you care about, so that we desperately need ways to quiet the mind, to tend the heart, to listen to ourselves and one another in the present, right where we are, and not in the future, and not in our fears, and not in the past, to live our life, to become mindful. And I like the word mindful, loving awareness, mindful, loving attention, exactly where we are. So there were a number of chapters of the struggles we have, our fears and our grief and the trauma we carry. And what does it mean to find ways to release that and to see with the eyes of kindness that you talked about and compassion, and realize that we have that great heart of compassion in ourselves, that we can embody this. So that's part of the book.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's your latest one. And tell them the name of that again.
That's called No Time Like the Present.
No Time Like the Present.
And it's full of stories, because I'm a storyteller. So
right. I love your stories. Spirit Rock Center. When did that emerge? When did you create that?
30 some years ago. We were looking for a place. We had a beautiful center in the East Coast in Massachusetts, the Eastside Meditation Society. And a whole group of people I've been teaching in California said, we need a place out here. And they were too expensive or too far away or whatever. And then someone called and said, there's this old Native American sacred land out in the San Geronimo Valley. And Nature Conservancy owns it, but they want to sell it because they have better things to do than keep this land. So we looked, it was gorgeous. And they said, if you buy this land, it was not $1 million for 420 acres, which in Marin, you can't buy a garage for that.
Wow.
It was a whole huge valley. They said, if you buy this and steward it, that you keep most of it open land and you take care of it and so forth, then we'll take that money and buy 50,000 acres of rainforest in South America and save the rainforest. So it was kind of a win-win for everyone. And then we started to have our retreats, and people loved coming because they needed to step out of their lives and have a quiet time like Gandhi for a week, or a weekend or week, and have the supportive community around to really be invited to drop into their heart and also to do the healing. When all the stories and the grief and tears come, those are part of it.
Right.
You allow the tears and you hold the measure of sorrows that you have. And then you realize that you're called upon to hold it with a great heart of compassion.
Right. Now, it appears like right now we're living at a time where everything's at a fever pitch.
Yes.
We can look at the Congo, we can look at Gaza, Israel, we can
Sudan.
Hundreds
Hundreds of thousands of people in Sudan and Darfur, and huge numbers of people.
Right.
Myanmar, the Rohingya, terrible.
All these things are going on. What would you say to people right now? I mean, obviously these things, from the Vietnam War, everything came into our room through Ted Turner, through TNT. We allow things the population didn't know about suddenly was on our screen, and people can say, "What? That's going on?" So obviously there was an uprising of stopping this illegal war, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now there's a lot, and there's a lot of good happening on the planet as well. Do you carry an optimism about the human species? What do you carry personally when we see all this stuff going on the planet? You mentioned the rainforest, climate. You have the governor of Florida making it illegal to use the word climate change in any governmental language anymore. He's eliminating the windmills that produce electricity. He doesn't want that in Florida anymore. I mean, we have a lot of things going on about people who have limited their perception about reality. Do you still carry a sense of optimism?
So you got to laugh when you hear, okay, we're eliminating. It's sort of like out of 1984, one of those dystopian novels that lies are truth and will eliminate. You can't eliminate love, and you can't eliminate truth. You simply cannot. And we know it somewhere. People hear it and they go, okay, this is nuts. I don't know what to. So there's a story about Margaret Mead, the great anthropologist, who was asked what she saw was the beginning of human civilization. Because she was studying, there were the arrowheads and flint things that dated back hundreds of thousands of years. Where did humanity start? Where did human civilization start? And she said, in her research, they found the bones tens of thousands, 50,000 years or 100,000 years, whatever it was, of a person, a woman's body, in a cave that had been broken. She'd broken her leg, and then it healed. And she said, if she were an animal, if an animal breaks its leg out in the wild, it just lies down and it dies. So it gets eaten. But somebody took this woman and carried her to a safe place and fed her and gave her water and cared for her for a couple months until she healed. She said, that is the beginning of human civilization. Right there, because it's really who we are. So in your question, we've been going at it a long time, and there have been huge wars. I mean, in my mother's lifetime, World War I, World War II, and racism, it's not a new thing. Climate change is new, but there's lots of other bad things that have been happening. That's not, it's hard to bear. It's hard to bear. The world is on fire in that way, but it's not the main story. As you said, Michael, there are good things. And even in the course of this conversation, 45 minutes or whatever, there have been 1 billion acts of kindness. People opening the door for someone who can't open it. People stopping at a red light so that people can go through the green. Mothers putting, porridge or rice or tortillas on their child's plate in the morning. Fathers putting their children to bed. A zillion acts, none of it gets in the news. The world lives on care and kindness. The forests are, the wood wide web, the trees are supporting each other. we get the bad news
Yes.
and we have to tend and listen to it, but that's not the main story.
Yes.
The main story is life itself, and it's the play of mind and consciousness. And we have the gift of being conscious and having a heart, and we can embody and live that. And then you reach out and you do what you can. And if enough of us reach out, and if enough of us stand up, hold it, and love each in our own community, in our own way, that's what makes the difference. That's the great turning from the individual world where it's, dog eat dog,
Yeah.
American rugged capitalism that's run amok,
Right.
to interdependence, to
Yes.
realize that every breath we take, we breathe together with the rainforests and the oceans, and that we're all really part of the same living web of consciousness and life. And then you feel it and you do your part.
Absolutely. And this is what we're seeking to do. I mean, people are literally addicted to fear and worry and anxiousness and bad news. And as you indicated, there's so much love and so much good on the planet happening that is not coming on the media. That's not their job. That's not what they're prone to do. They're prone to give us the lowest common denominator of the human experience. And yet there's so much forgiveness happening in so many places and so much compassion. And I used to say years ago that if in fact we had a media that actually reflected that on a regular basis, these are the people who got healed today. These are the people who overcame disease. These are the people who had truces. These are the people who had forgiveness. If that became a part of our dynamic of our mind, then we would be programmed differently. We would actually begin to see the good happening on the planet rather than be blind to it and only seeing the lowest common denominator of the human experience. So what I'm getting from what you're saying is that you still, with all the 50 years and more of seeing so much, you still are carrying a sense of optimism about the unfoldment of our species.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality of it. The reality is actually love.
Yeah.
That's the big reality.
Yeah.
I mean, love is like gravity. We were all together in the Big Bang, and we remember that when we were lucky, that we're actually part of the same light and family and commune. There's a kind of commune of life itself and consciousness. And when you feel it, people don't feel it all the time, but you go walking in the high mountains, or you listen to an amazing piece of music, or you make love, or you're there at the birth of a child, or that moment of death, that mystery when spirit leaves the body, and you go, wow, we are living in mystery. And the heart softens and you go, wow, isn't this fantastic? What else is there to do at the end of life? What else is there to do but love? You love a new baby when they come in, you hold the hand of somebody who's leaving, I love you. Let's do it in between.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Absolutely. You said something earlier about perfecting our loving. And when you study all of those cases of people who have those near death or near life experiences, they all come back with the same testimony that we're here to perfect our loving. We're on Earth School to perfect our loving. And when you were talking about Margaret Mead, it reminded me of a statement that was attributed to Randy. The name is blocking, but he was in Africa studying. He had been in Africa studying for a while. And they said, how does it feel to be back in civilization? He said, we ought to try it sometime.
Yeah.
Well, who said that?
That's it.
Or
what do you think of Western civilization? It would be a good idea.
Yeah. Who was that said that?
Gandhi, actually. He was asked, how did he look? It was not from Africa, it was from India. How does Western civilization appear to you? We said, it would be a good idea.
Yeah, there was another individual.
There might be somebody else from Africa too.
Yeah, I can't remember his name. It'll probably pop in as soon as this program is over.
Yeah.
But absolutely, we got to put the civil back into civilization, and we have to open our heart. And as you are teaching, you're actually giving technology, inner technology, for that to occur. So it's not just, as you began this conversation, not just having an idea about it or being an academician about it or a philosopher about it. We become about it as we practice these spiritual technologies that you have gifted the world with for so many years.
And one of the things that makes me really happy, because I've been training teachers for a long time, because it's not us, but it's in part of the game, is that we empower each other and see the
Right.
beauty in each other. And so I have an online teacher training called Mindfulness Meditation Teacher Certification. It's a 2-year training. We've had 7,000 people in 75 countries go through this.
Mm.
And I get notes. I'm teaching self-compassion and mindfulness awareness in Lahore, Pakistan, in a women's clinic, or I'm a teacher in Kenya, Nairobi, and all my students love learning to be quiet and become mindful and steadying themselves. So we've got people from 75 countries, and it's fantastic training if anybody's interested in learning how to actually not only practice yourself these things, but then to offer them to others.
Absolutely. Tell the folks that are tuning in how they can be in contact with you, or anything else you want to say about, what you're doing. And I just got the name. The name was Albert Schweitzer.
Oh, Albert Schweitzer, of course.
Yeah, he said,
great,
I went to school with his grandson, Randy Schweitzer.
Okay,
And
yes.
so,
He was a remarkable sage and great figure. Anyway, if people are further interested, they can go to jackkornfield.com, Kornfield, and there is information about the 2-year teacher training if you want to learn how to both not just practice, but teach compassion and mindfulness and meditation to other folks. Really a wonderful training. All kinds of other stuff. Lots of free talks, lots of courses and things like that. And mostly, I guess, for me, writing books, doing things online, the game is just to say, here's beautiful things. They're ours. They're the heritage of humanity, and some of them come from Buddhist Asia, and some of them we draw on from the elders of the indigenous world of all kinds.
Yes.
But it's really who we are. And here, let me remind you so you can carry this too.
Absolutely. This has been beautiful, Jack. I think that was your last comment. Anything else that we didn't come up that you might say, oh, I wish I would have said that? Anything bubbling up?
Michael, I'll think of that later.
That's what happens. I'm glad Albert Schweitzer came out before.
Boy, I could have said something so eloquent, but no, I'd love the conversation and also hearing your wisdom. Kind of, it's a little bit of a dance together that I appreciate. And when we do these things, and I know you do them all the time, I kind of feel into the people who are listening. And try to imagine and sense that we're in the room together, and it's not the room of the electronics, but it's the room of the heart. It's the room of being.
Absolutely. And there's plenty of room in this room. Jack Kornfield, thank you so much for being with us today. Appreciate it.
Michael Beckwith, thank you in return. And to everyone, thank you.
Absolutely. God bless you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Love is all over you. Peace and blessings. Dynamic blessings to you, and this is our moment of meditation, our moment of paying attention to that which is real, that which is essential. That's often how I describe meditation. The ability to pay attention to that which is real. Capital R, real, the eternal, not just what appears to be real, which is the world of phenomena. So I'm going to invite you to turn within with me. Let's just do that now. Let's take our attention inward. And I want you to see how you can have dominion over your attention. Right now, without touching your right knee, just pay attention to it. Just notice that you can bring your attention to your right knee. Bring your attention to your left hand. Bring your attention to the top of your head. So notice that you can govern your own attention. And oftentimes, the world and those people who are trying to sell you things are trying to take your attention. Whether it is the media, whether it is companies trying to sell you something you don't need, but you can govern your own attention. Now, we can call that mindfulness, loving kindness. But I'm saying to you right now that you are rich enough to pay attention. So now, place your attention on this intention. I am intending to wake up to my glorious nature. I am intending to wake up to my true, authentic nature. Just say that to yourself. Pay attention to that. I am intending to wake up to my authentic nature, my true nature. Now take your attention, keep embracing the intention, but become present with the breath. The body is breathing. Other things may be vying for your attention. A personality part of yourself may be vying for your attention with worry, or projecting a worst-case scenario into the future, or some inner conversation or something on your to-do list. But right now, you are developing a level of sovereignty and governance over your attention. Your attention is on your intention. You are intending to wake up to your real nature, and you're being present with the breath. You are practicing the art and the science of meditation, paying attention. If your mind has begun to wander somewhere, checking off your to-do list or something you need to do in the future, or ruminating about some past experience, you can be aware of that, but you're paying attention to your vibration of your intention and the breath. You are present with the breath. You are present with your intention. But you are aware of the mind chatter, sensations of the body, emotions that might be arising, but they are passing through your awareness. You are aware. You are awareness, and you have the ability to pay attention. Just for another few seconds, be still and be present with your breath. And in this awareness, pay attention to the feeling tone of gratitude and thanksgiving that you are alive. Feel your aliveness as you move in the world, but of your sense of aliveness, You're making a vibrational difference on this planet. Let us give thanks for this. And so it is. And so we let it be. As we open our eyes, let me say to you, now, so be it. Be the frequency of gratitude. You're rich enough to pay attention to it. Have a beautiful day, a beautiful afternoon, a beautiful evening, a beautiful night. Have a beautiful life. It's your choice. I appreciate your letters and emails that you've been sending in, but also the notes you're sending on the Instagram and on the website, thanking me for Take Back Your Mind. And I thank you for your support. As I've said before, if you want to support Take Back Your Mind, support the sponsors. The main sponsor is the Agape International Spiritual Center, agapelive.com. We have a Facebook presentation, an Instagram presentation, a YouTube presentation, and a website presentation. You can donate to the sponsor at agapelive.com. It's one way that you can donate. It supports the podcast. Second sponsor is Nutrarise.com. You go to Nutrarise.com, those 3 lines up at the top, you touch that line, and you'll get Adaptozen. Adaptozen are my products. The Super Green Superfood Greens and the vitamin D3 K2. Both extremely good for your health, your nutrition. You support the sponsors, you're supporting the podcast. Have a beautiful, and as I like to say, a bright day, luminous day, because you are a luminous being. Peace and blessings. Your time is very valuable, so I want to thank you for lending us your ear and participating in taking back your mind. If you want to submit a question for the question of the week, please submit it to podcast@michaelbeckwith.com. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, please submit a review and let us know your thoughts. Stay on top of current episodes by subscribing to the podcast so that you'll receive alerts and not miss one single episode. And feel free to share this podcast with all of your friends and family. And until we meet again, take back your mind, and you will take back your life.